All right, so let's get started. So tonight we are concluding our series on the book of Mark. For those of you who haven't been here before, we've been going through the book of Mark all semester. It's an exciting culmination tonight, and we're talking about an interesting topic that maybe some of you are wondering, what in the world is he going to talk about? But then next week, we are going to have our Christmas party, so I want to invite all of you guys to come back next week. We're going to meet in the campus center, which is that big open area right down the hallway this way. And we are going to wrap some gifts that you guys have bought for the adoptive families. We are going to have some music. We're going to have some games. We are going to have some prizes for the for Christmas sweaters and socks. And it will be raffle style. So basically, to be entered in, you need to wear a Christmas sweater or Christmas socks. There will be two separate ones, one for sweaters, one for socks. Have a number of opportunities to win some fun prizes. So go ahead and come back next week. It'll be awesome. And also next week, make sure you bring a plate of your favorite Christmas dessert. But we do ask no nuts, please, because some people are allergic. Okay? So check that out. So tonight, as we conclude, I want to talk about a guy, and for a second you're going to think I mean Jesus, just because we're going to be celebrating Jesus' birthday so quickly here. But I'm actually going to talk about a guy who we celebrate typically in January. Now I see all your brains working. Next month, we typically celebrate the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr. He was born on January 15th, 1929, and he passed away on April 4th, 1968. He was actually born Michael Luther King Jr., for those of you who didn't know that. Later changed his name to Martin, because Martin is such a rocking name, right? Okay? Yeah. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about him. I assume that most of you guys have taken history classes at some point. But he was always a strong worker for civil rights for members of his race. In fact, King was a member of the executive committee of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, a leading organization of its kind in the nation. He was ready then, in early December of 1955, to accept the leadership of the first great Negro nonviolent demonstration of the contemporary times of the United States, the bus boycott described by Gunnar Jan in his presentation speech to honor them, and the boycott lasted 382 days. Finally, on December 21st, 1956, after the United States Supreme Court had finally declared it unconstitutional, the laws requiring segregation on buses for Negroes and whites to ride the buses finally as equals. And during those days, or boycott, King was arrested. His home was bombed. He was subjected to personal abuse. But at the same time, he emerged as one of the very most influential African-American leaders of really the first rank. And in 1957, he was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was an organization formed to provide new leadership for a now growing civil rights movement at that time. And in fact, in the 11-year period between 57 and 68, King traveled over 6 million miles. Think about that, okay? And again, this is in the 50s and 60s. He traveled over 6 million miles and spoke over 2,500 times. 2,500 times. I speak once or twice a week here with SWAT, and I'm nowhere even close to that in the last 7 years, okay? 2,500 times. That's a ton. Appearing wherever there was injustice, wherever there were protests and action, and meanwhile he wrote 5 books as well as numerous articles. And in those years, he led a massive protest in Birmingham, Alabama that caught the attention of the entire world, providing what they called a coalition of the conscience, and inspired a letter from Birmingham jail, a policy of the African American Revolution, and he planned the drives in Alabama for the registration of African Americans as voters, and he dedicated the peaceful march on Washington, D.C. of 250 4,000, that's 250,000 people, who he delivered the address,
I have a dream.
I have a dream. Which I think most of you at least heard part of. He was arrested upwards of 20 times and assaulted at least 4 times that we know of. He was awarded 5 honorary degrees, was named Man of the Year by Time magazine in 1963, and he became not only the symbolic leader of the African Americans, but also a world figure. And at the age of 35, Martin Luther King Jr. was the youngest man to have received the Nobel Peace Prize. When notified of his selection, he announced that he would turn over the prize money, which at the time was $54,123, to the furtherance of the civil rights movement. Then, on the evening of April 4th, 1968, while standing on the balcony of his motel room in Memphis, Tennessee, where he was to lead a protest march in sympathy with striking garbage workers of that city, he was assassinated. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his life for something that he loved. He gave his life for something that he loved. He gave his life for something that he was passionate about, something that excited him, something that when he woke up in the morning put a smile on his face, that he got to do something that he really believed in. And the thing is that what I'm talking about is not just the civil rights movement. Absolutely was he passionate about the civil rights movement, but not just that alone. He gave his life because he believed that Jesus died for the sins of the world, no matter what skin color. He died for you no matter what your skin color. That's what he believed. And oftentimes, I think that we are afraid. We are afraid to live, and we're afraid to love like people like Martin Luther King Jr. Would we be willing to march for civil rights? Yeah, I think a lot of us probably would. Okay? Would we be willing to do what seems to be reasonable or practical? Yeah, most of us probably would. But when it comes to real, genuine love, I think most of us probably fall short, including myself. Maybe that's because we lack a passion for Jesus Christ. Maybe it's because we are afraid of how acting that way will make us look to our friends. Maybe it's because it would cost us too much, whether it be money, whether it be time, whether it be even our life, like it was for him. I believe Martin Luther King Jr. lived his life with what I'm going to call wasteful love. Wasteful love. Now, to you guys, that might seem like a bad thing, right? It sounds bad, doesn't it? Wasteful love, okay? But has it ever occurred to you that one of the characteristics of love is truly wastefulness? Maybe wastefulness isn't such a good word. Maybe a better word for it is extravagance. Has it ever occurred to you that Jesus displayed some of these very traits of the prodigal? According to Webster's dictionary, prodigal means to be recklessly extravagant. And a prodigal is one who spends lavishly or gives foolishly. So this wastefulness, this reckless extravagance, is a characteristic of love. And Jesus was the model of pure and perfect love. Perfect love is oftentimes the opposite of what I will call duty. Okay? I call perfect love passion. Perfect love is passion. So this extravagant, this wasteful love can be summed up like this. Your duty does only what it has to do. Love goes the second mile. Duty is content with fulfilling its obligation. Love is not content until it does more than necessary. Duty despises wastefulness, and love thrives on it. I want to give you a few examples of what I mean by this. Extravagant or wasteful love can be seen in a husband who buys his wife flowers. Because if you have ever bought flowers, gentlemen, they ain't cheap, are they? Amen. And what happens a few days, or maybe if you're lucky, a week later? They die and they get thrown away, right? Okay? That's wasteful love, right? Okay? What about extravagant wasteful love? It can be seen in the wife who prepares her husband's favorite dinner, even though she knows when the meal is over, there's going to be nothing left but dirty dishes. What about extravagant wasteful love? It can be seen in a mother who hugs her little child after he gives her a flower. A flower he picked. A flower he picked from her garden. That is extravagant, wasteful love. Friends, yes, love is wasteful. Yes, love is extravagant. But the question really is, would you want it any other way? In Mark chapter 14, which is what we're going to be looking at tonight, there's a beautiful story about an extravagant act of love toward Jesus. An act that was so extravagant, and so wasteful, in fact, that it was criticized for its recklessness, and that it was criticized for its wastefulness. Mark 14, starting in verse 3. If you'd like to follow along with your Bibles, you may. While he was in Bethany at the house of Simon, who had a serious skin disease, he was reclining at the table. A woman came with an alabaster jar of pure and expensive fragrant oil of nard. She broke the jar and poured it on his head. But some were expressing indignation to one another. Why has this fragrant oil been wasted? For this oil might have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor. And so they began to scold her. And then Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a noble thing for me. You always have the poor with you, and you can do what is good for them whenever you want, but you do not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body in advance for burial. I assure you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told in memory of her." Oddly enough, where do we find this story? In the Bible for all to read in the whole world. So how does love waste? The reason that love wastes is that love does not count cost. Love doesn't count cost. You will never see love calculating. If you are thinking to yourself, should I date this person? If you are finding yourself calculating about it, that is not love. Just a little quick tidbit for you, okay? Love never thinks about how little it can decently give. In other words, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, boy, this friend is really in need, I really ought to give them some money. Or they really need some help with their homework. Or they really need this, or they need that, or whatever it might be. They need a friend to talk to. And you're sitting there to yourself thinking, well, let's see, if I give them 15 minutes, will that shut them up for a while? If I give them a 20, will that do? Or are they going to come back for more? Guys, love doesn't think about how little it can decently give. Love's one desire is to give to the absolute limit. It's to give to the absolute limit. I like the way William Barclay has said. He said this: "We have not even begun to be Christian if we think of giving to Christ and to His church in terms of as little as we can respectably give." I want to reread verses 4 and 5. "But some were expressing indignation to one another. Why has this fragrant oil been wasted? For this oil might have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor. And they began to scold her." Here's another thing about love. Love's waste will produce criticism. If you are acting in a way that is loving wastefully, you will be criticized for it. There is no doubt about it. One theologian, when I was reading about this passage, admitted this in his writings. He said this: "Had I been there when that woman emptied her jar of expensive oil on Jesus' head, I would have hit the roof. Why was this oil wasted this way? It might have been sold and given to the poor. And I doubt whether it would have been any great concern for the poor that might have upset me. I think it would have been the principle of the thing. Pouring away precious perfume like it's so much water. A dab or two behind the ear, all right. But the whole bottle? Outrageous! Right? But here's the thing. It wasn't even the cost that bothered the disciples, but it was actually how she had used the perfume, right? Because if you would have saw her and she was putting a little bit on and saving some, and she used it over like the period of the next year, nobody would have said a thing, right? This wouldn't even be in a story. Nobody would care about it. But the reality is that it was reckless and extravagant. And that is what assaulted the disciples' sense of practicality. Why would you do that? What a waste. Therefore, their criticism rose up sharply against her. And then we see Jesus respond. And again, I'll read verses 6 through 9. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a noble thing for me. You always have the poor with you, and you can do what is good for them whenever you want. But you do not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body in advance for burial. I assure you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in this world, what this woman has done will also be told in memory of her." You see, love wastes because love goes past duty. It goes past whatever obligation you do. Okay? The reality is, it was not her job. She was not asked to do this. She was not asked to pour and anoint Jesus with this perfume. That wasn't like she would have gotten fired, or she would have gotten kicked out of the house, or the area, or whatever it would be. There was no expectation whatsoever on her at all. Love is what caused her to go beyond what her duty was. Let me ask you some questions. Is it your job, is it your duty to give 10% of a tithe to church? Is it our duty to attend every single worship service, to never miss SWAT on a Wednesday night? Is it our duty to smile at our peers at school in the hallway when we're going between classes? Is it our duty to answer questions over and over and over to our grandparent who has dementia or Alzheimer's? Even when we know that they're going to ask again and again. You know what? No, that is not our duty. It is not something that we have to do. But because of love, we do this. There's no logical reason to it. There is no command for us to do it. But have you ever stopped to think what a difference it would make if here at SWAT, if we could become enthusiastic for Jesus, as we are as enthusiastic for Jesus as we are in our enthusiasm for other things? Think about that. Let me give you an example to illustrate this. I like sports. I'm a fan of a lot of sports. And each week during the football season, hundreds of thousands of people fill these stadiums that we have all over the country to cheer on their favorite teams, right? Now, I know many of you do not agree with me, but I'm a Chicago Bears fan, okay? I've been a Chicago Bears fan for 33 years of my life, which is all of my life for the record.
That's Wasteful Love.
It seriously has been. But that wasn't my point quite. Through good times, which have been very few, and through the bad, which have been very many, I do think that you can be a football fan and a Christian at the same time, by the way. Although I think that there are some people who have gotten their priorities a little bit mixed up. Think about this. Now, I am somebody who has gone to Soldier Field in Chicago, and I've seen the Bears play. I've also been to Lambeau Field and watched the Bears play the Packers, and the Bears actually won that time, for the record. Not very often, so you could probably figure out which one it was, just because that's about how often it happens. But I know that there is a price to be paid in order to watch them at the stadium, isn't there? Unless you are among the early birds, you're not going to find any close parking spaces, so you're going to end up walking about 3 miles and paying probably at least $20 to park your car, if not more. And when you finally do get into the stadium, you're often going to find yourself sitting amongst some pretty inconsiderate people, walking in front of you in the middle of a play, spilling their drinks around you, especially if they're drinking alcohol. You'll swelter in the heat if it's the early months of the season, and then you'll shiver in the cold if it's the later months of the season. You'll cheer yourself so that you don't even have a voice anymore, and you're going to be hollering and screaming and behaving like some kind of fanatic. And then you're going to pay way too much money for a cold hot dog and probably some watered-down drinks. And then when you leave, you're going to walk 3 miles to go back to your car. And by the way, you will have spent probably over $100 for each of the tickets that you bought. And you will tell any single person that will listen to you, "Oh, that was the best! That was such a great time. I'm so glad I spent a small fortune, like 2 months' salary on that. That was so great." Right? We do that. Many of us do that. Or if it's not football, it's something else, right? Have you ever stopped to think what kind of revolution would take place right here in your own youth group if we were even half as enthusiastic about Jesus? But this woman, she loved Jesus with reckless extravagance and without hesitating and without holding back, and she found a way to express it. Sure, some people thought it was stupid, but she found a way for her to be able to express that. Do you know what the best example of wasteful love is? For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. The life of Christ is the ultimate explanation of wasteful love. I mean, think about it. A guy who is God comes down to be in fully human form, yet also still fully God, and he lives in this world where he is going to be subject to all the temptation, all the ridicule, all the terrible things that many of you guys experience on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, okay? And then, on top of all that, after living a perfect life, decides, even though all of us have sinned, have made mistakes, oftentimes every single day, sometimes every hour, decides to take upon himself all of the sin of the world on his shoulders and die an agonizing death, and finally being put up on the cross and dying for us. Is there any measure of logic to that? Why would you do that? Does it have any mark of common sense for the only man who's completely perfect to die so that the rest of humanity could live even though we were so sinful? In his death, he poured out himself in wasteful abandon, in reckless extravagance to become our Savior. The prodigal Savior. You see, the cross has become the sacrifice that, to all of us, that is logical. It is reasonable. It is practical. It is sensible. But what a waste is this! The most complete of all wastes. Yet in God's wisdom, it is this wasteful love, this reckless extravagance that saves us. It is the holiest of waste, and it alone brings salvation. So I want to leave you with a challenge tonight. We have a choice of going through life and being practical, and being reasonable, and being sensible, like the disciples, or instead we can be like our prodigal Savior, Jesus, and we can be recklessly extravagant in how we love other people. What are you going to choose? Are you going to choose to come to church even though you have to sacrifice something else? Are you going to choose to read your Bible and spend time in prayer with a God that loves you deeply, even though you have invitations to do maybe 100 different other things in your day? Are you going to walk through your school hallways and instead of being like everybody else with your earbuds in, staring at the floor, ignoring everyone? Are you going to walk and are you going to have your head held high and are you going to smile at people? Because it just might make one person's day. When you have opportunities to talk about Jesus and his reckless, wasteful love, are you going to take that chance? Are you going to take the chance that somebody might say, "You're crazy"? Boy, that's dumb. I can't believe you believe that. Are you willing to hear people say that? As even the disciples thought this woman, who Jesus thought, "This is awesome what she is doing for me," even they thought she was dumb. And these are the people closestly following Jesus. We can be led astray so quickly. Will you love people extravagantly like Jesus loves you extravagantly, wastefully? Because he loves you that much. Do you believe it? Do you know it? Will you share it? Let's pray. Father God, thank you for your wasteful love that you have poured out on us. God, we do not deserve it. We should not expect it. Yet, Father, you have done some amazing things through bringing your Son to the cross in the most wasteful act of love that we have ever seen on this earth. Father, I pray that if we have not put our trust and faith in Jesus, that we would consider speaking to you tonight in prayer and asking you to work in our hearts, to help us understand more about you. Father, and I pray that you would challenge us just to do something this week. One thing that would be an act of wasteful love towards someone else. Maybe it's to a family member. Maybe it's for a friend. Maybe it's for somebody we don't even know. And God, I thank you for all the students who have participated in Change Wars and in the Adopt a Family Christmas. That is wasteful love right there. We thank you for Jesus. Amen.
You guys can stand up for our closing.